Madam Speaker, I rise to move the following motion: that this Parliament supports a review or a repeal of the Media Industry Development Decree 2010 to ensure Fiji has a free, fair and unfettered media industry in conformity to a modern democratic nation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'd like to second the motion, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Ratu Isor. I now call on the Honourable Dr. Biman Prasad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At the outset, Madam Speaker, let me say that this motion is not about politics. It is not a political motion, but simply a necessity in a true and modern democracy. Madam Speaker, if this House agrees or passes this motion, I think it will be a big win for all members of Parliament. It will be a big win for the media industry. It will be a big win for the journalists. It will be a win for the economy. It will be a win for Fiji, Madam Speaker. And I brought this motion with that in mind. Fiji's future as a social, economic and politically stable nation cannot be guaranteed unless freedom of expression is enshrined through a free, fair and credible media. We firmly believe, Madam Speaker, that this is not pessimism. It's a reality. It's a reality. The media industry in this country has been under siege since December 2006. For more than 5 years, especially after the abrogation of the 1997 Constitution, Madam Speaker, on 10th April 2009, have been turbulent and devastating for the media industry and media organizations. The work of the media industry, especially after the start of the coup culture in 1987, has been remarkable, in some ways balanced, informative, and on many occasions impartial, except for a brief period after the 87 coups. However, Madam Speaker, the enforcement of the media censorship under the public emergency regulations after April 2009 until January 2012, and the promulgation of the Media Industry Development Decree 2010 has seriously undermined media freedom in Fiji. Madam Speaker, media throughout the world, as we all know, is generally regarded as the fourth state. It's the last line of defenders of democracy, human rights, dignity, and justice. Article 19, Madam Speaker, of Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through the media, regardless of frontiers," Madam Speaker, unquote. Madam Speaker, this freedom and right is reposed in the people, which the state and politicians and governments and parliaments like ours must respect at all times. The Media Industry Development Decree, Madam Speaker, without doubt, is regressive and suppresses media freedom because it imposes restrictions and prescribes heavy penalties. This decree must either be repealed, Madam Speaker, or amended substantially, because we believe that the media should not be regulated by the state or any government. Madam Speaker, the restoration of parliamentary democracy has, in my view, and in the views of a lot of people, has seen little change in the behavior of large sections of our media and individual journalists. And there's a reason for this, Madam Speaker. There's a reason for this. It is not the choice of the media industry and journalists, but a result of severe penalties in the decree that I wish to outline, Madam Speaker. The Media Industry Development Authority is is essentially an enforcer of government's agenda on many occasions as far as the media is concerned. In January this year, Madam Speaker, the MIDA chairman, Mr. Ashwin Raj, who is present here, he spoke about the need for the focus to shift on freedom of expression and ethics. Words are mere rhetoric, Madam Speaker. The decree renders freedom and ethics meaningless. Madam Speaker, Part 2 of the decree outlines the structure and the functions of the Media Industry Development Authority. The minister appoints the chairperson and 5 other members and can also remove them. This is an obvious and it could be a major conflict of interest. Section 17, Madam Speaker, provides the authority immunity from legal proceedings, civil or criminal. While the media is bound by restrictive rules and regulations, the media authority can act with virtual impunity. Where is the balance and where is the fairness, Madam Speaker? Where is the accountability? Section 22 states, content must not include material which is A, against the public interest or order, B, against national interest, or C, creates communal discord. This is a very broad provision open to interpretation by the government or anybody else. It is, Madam Speaker, like a noose around the neck of the media. Madam Speaker, this provision is unnecessary because offences such as those are already adequately covered under crimes decree, under the Public Order Act, on racial and religious vilification, hate speech, and economic sabotage. Part 5, Madam Speaker, covering enforcement of media standards, allows the authority to enforce the disclosure of specified documents or information as well as the right to enter, search and confiscate documents. When it comes to breach of confidentiality, the standard practice in democracies is that it is referred to the courts, which rely on precedents and can be expected, Madam Speaker, to come up with fair, impartial judgments. But in Fiji, Madam Speaker, this function has been somewhat usurped by MIDA, which is, in my view, controlled by governments through appointments made by the minister. And this is yet another noose around the media's neck. Part 8, Madam Speaker, deals with the media tribunal, which consists of a chairperson, a qualified judge appointed by the President on the advice of the Attorney General. The tribunal adjudicates complaints received from MIDA. It has to comply with the directions of the responsible minister pertaining to policy. The tribunal also has to consider the Attorney General's submission during certain proceedings. It makes hearings vulnerable to political interference, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it also increases the level of government control and pressure on the tribunal. This is by no means an independent tribunal. It is tied to government in too many ways. It may not be happening, Madam Speaker. It may not be happening. But this provision is unethical and not transparent. Part 10 deals with the powers of the tribunal, Madam Speaker, and these include ordering fines of up to 100,000 against media companies, 25,000 against publishers, editors, and $1,000 against other media employees as monetary compensation to complainants. Upon conviction for any breaches of the media code, a media organization, Madam Speaker, could be fined 100,000. The publisher, the editor, 25,000 and/or 2 years imprisonment, and a journalist, Madam Speaker, or media, 1,000 and/or 2 years imprisonment. Madam Speaker, this is unnecessary, especially when we have defamation laws in place. It is an example of a duplicitous and tricky legislation, a waste of time and resources. Such payouts can ruin media companies and journalists, and to protect themselves, journalists and media companies resort to, Madam Speaker, self-censorship. This is a fact. This is a fact. Madam Speaker, media organizations can challenge decisions in the Court of Appeal, but only for awards in excess of $50,000. Media workers, Madam Speaker, have no such options, even though the awards can lead to financial ruin in a sector where salaries are low compared to other professions. While the defendants have little recourse, complainants or the authority can challenge tribunal decisions in the Court of Appeal. This is yet another example of the lopsided and one-sided legislation. Madam Speaker, we've had in the past the government justifying the media decree on social, economic and political stability. However, all these restrictive provisions, basically what they have done is to push opposition views into anonymous online media platforms where they have re-emerged, Madam Speaker, in more extreme forms. People have lost faith in the mainstream news media. Instead, they are relying on blogs where people are posting comments, some of which are full of rumors, misinformation, incitement to racial violence, and so on. It's happening because people don't believe the mainstream media in many ways. And we believe that this misguided media policy espoused through the decrees to be partly blamed for this state of affairs. On balance, Madam Speaker, there is a requirement in the decree that all news stories have to be balanced, otherwise they cannot be published. This is a further sign of a legislation simply gone wrong. This provision simply becomes a loophole to evade media and scrutiny by not responding to media questions. So if there is a statement from the opposition and the media goes to a government minister and the government minister chooses not to respond, then the media may not be able to run that particular story, Madam Speaker, and this has happened. This has happened. This has happened. And they're worried about the implications that if they do, then they will be slapped with these severe penalties. Madam Speaker, also, if the story is sometimes positive, and I've experienced this towards the government, this requirement is ignored. I'll give an example. We issued a press statement, and the next day, the media organization produced the government response without actually referring to anything that the press release which allowed the government to respond to it was reported in the media. Madam Speaker, every international organization of repute that I have known since this decree came into being has expressed concern about the regressive and draconian provisions of this decree. And allow me to just give you a few examples. The Human Rights Watch, a non-government human rights organization, says that the decree should be removed. Reporters Without Borders, a France-based non-profit organization, Madam Speaker, which has consultant status of the United Nations and UNESCO, it says, and I quote, "Revoke the media industry development decree and its draconian punitive measures against journalists, editors and media organizations, and adopt, Madam Speaker, self-regulatory media framework encouraging a free press." Madam Speaker, the International Federation of Journalists, IFJ, world's largest organization of journalists, first established in 1926, currently represents about 600,000 members in more than 100 countries, Madam Speaker. And it says the following: "The IFJ is extremely worried that the decree allows the authority and tribunal that it would set up to have the power to call for any documentation, to enter media offices, to seize materials and equipment. It is extremely worrying that the decree allows for fines of up to Australian 300,000 and or prison of up to 5 years for a range of offences," unquote, Madam Speaker. Freedom House, Madam Speaker, an independent watchdog organization dedicated to the expansion of freedom around the world, and I quote, "Violations of the vaguely worded public interest or public order provisions of the decree are punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 or imprisonment of up to 2 years for journalists. The penalty for any media company that breaches the decree may be as high as 100,000 Fijian. In addition, it overrides traditional checks and balances by forbidding the judiciary to challenge the decree or the institutions by it," unquote. Madam Speaker, genuine democracy equal citizenry, freedom of expression, accountability, transparency, which are ethics that every government, every parliament, every country would want to promote, Madam Speaker, can only be achieved through free, fair, credible, and non-regulated media. Let me conclude, Madam Speaker, by saying once again, this is not a political motion. This is not a motion to gain political mileage. This is a motion that will put this parliament, that will allow members of parliament, that will allow journalists, media organizations, and indeed Fiji as a country to tell the world that we have changed this decree, or we have repealed this decree to allow for the freedom that we espouse as part of our parliamentary democracy in this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I commend the motion to the House.
The House is now open for debate. The Honourable Minister for Education.
Madam Speaker, I'm quite shocked to hear the Honourable Member, Dr. Biman Prasad, saying that we should repeal the media industry development decree. Coming from a former academic colleague, I'm totally taken aback. Madam Speaker, I note he alluded to saying that it will not be a loss to the people, to the economy, to the country. Unfortunately, that's not true. I'll demonstrate that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, media, whether it's online, print, voice, or on air, play a very important role in shaping the kind of nature of society that we want, or we have a vision for. A very important, very critical role, Madam Speaker. Please listen. Please listen. Media acts as a critic and conscious of the society, Madam Speaker. It is our eyes and ears on the ground. It helps us at times to reach the people, the scene faster than we are able to do. It raises issues which need to be pursued by researchers or by policymakers through in-depth research, Madam Speaker. It raises issues. Given the immense responsibility of the media and the profound impact it could have on the society and people, we need to have a framework, Madam Speaker. What the Media Industry Development Decree does is to provide a framework within which the media industry should operate. It ensures that, Madam Speaker, the framework ensures that they're responsible, they're ethical, they contribute to the development of the wisdom that we want to have in the society that will help us develop the vision of the government. Madam Speaker, if there's any grievance, Madam Speaker, people can take it to the media tribunal. Now, there's a number of assertions and allegations that the Honourable Member has made about the media tribunal, but not a single evidence has been given to us by the Honourable Member providing that the media tribunal is biased or could be biased. Not a single evidence has been given by the Honourable Member to show us that the ruling of a media tribunal has been biased. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, the Honourable Member has not been able to make any proper or solid justification for removal of the framework that provides media industry to function in the country. What the Honourable Member failed to realize is that it's not about self-regulation. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member is saying that we should allow the media industry to self-regulate. Madam Speaker, self-regulation does not mean you don't provide a framework for them to function. What the Media Industry Development Decree does is to provide a framework within which the media industry can function. It's a framework. So the question is, Madam Speaker, I'm shocked why the Honourable Member is saying that we should not provide a framework for media industry to operate and therefore give them unfettered access to have any kind of behaviour conduct in a small developing society where we were trying to build. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, we don't support this particular motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Honourable William Ngahoka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to contribute to the dialogue today on this very important motion to bring light back into this country. We started off the week, Madam Speaker, with a motion by the Prime Minister for Fiji to rejoin the International Parliamentary Union, which was greatly applauded by everyone. We salute the Prime Minister for taking Fiji back into the IPU, where we would observe democracy to its fullest, being part of a community that believes in the rights of mankind, which is virtually unlimited. What have we been accustomed to, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the reality in Fiji today is that we are not truly enjoying our democracy because of the media decree that holds everything back. The reality is that, Madam Speaker, for us at SODELPA, just recently, we paid 2 media organizations to run ads, fully paid. They did not run it. They were afraid. That is last week, Madam Speaker, in this modern day Fiji. And we have with us today students from the university. I'd like to ask them, do they really have freedom of expression to its fullest in this country?
Honourable Member, please do not include the guest speaker.
My apologies, Madam Speaker. My apologies, Madam Speaker. The youth of today, Madam Speaker, we spoke with a number of groups, and there is still this fear that is in them. We need to remove that. We owe it to a youth to enjoy freedom to its fullest. I normally say to them, I want you to taste freedom that I tasted. I was 21 once when Fiji became independent, and that brave new world that we entered, freedom that was unfettered, Madam Speaker, is what I want to pass on to our young of today. Today, Madam Speaker, we are not doing that. And it's work in progress, I agree. It's a long march back to freedom. But, Madam Speaker, we need to start unshackling what is holding us back to become a truly free people. Again, we applaud the IPU. Today, Madam Speaker, we should all vote and really look at our media decree and make Fiji truly free. Madam Speaker, I was just sharing with the youth about an experience I had in 2011. I left Nandi, I went to Sydney, Madam Speaker. And as soon as I arrived, you know how you stop at the airport, airplane, walk through the tunnel, into that thoroughfare, duty-free, immigration, pick your bags. Immediately I got into my car. There was something in the air that they told me, I used to live in a country like this. I don't know what it was. I still don't know today what it was. Was it the radio, someone on the radio, or was it the placards or whatever? I said, I used to live in a country like this. That was Sydney in 2011, and that was leading Nandi, which was very sullen. And I just don't know what it was. We need to bring that back. There's something about freedom. When it's in the air, it lifts the spirits and makes us all citizens that we all deserve to be. Madam Speaker, let's repeal the media decree and put Fiji back on the right pedestal. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I give the floor to the Honourable Ashnil Sudhakar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand here today, Madam, to add to my honourable and esteemed colleague, Dr. Mahendra Reddy, of what he has said. Madam Speaker, we have heard the motion that has been moved, and we have heard the views in support of the motion. The purpose of the Media Industry Development Decree 2010, Madam Speaker, is to make media more responsible, and that's the bottom line. Now, there have been suggestions, there's a motion before this Honourable House to remove this essential decree. Now, just imagine what will happen if this decree is removed. The mainstream media, as mentioned by Honourable Leader of NFP, is an essential arm of governance, fourth arm of governance. Now, if you remove the cover, remove the protection that the public enjoys with this decree, and that is to make the media more responsible. Remove that cover, what we will see is all that Hollywood stories, all those Hollywood stories that are written on blog sites will be brought in and published in the mainstream media. I am a legal practitioner, Madam Speaker. I am a lawyer with 11 years standing. And I have done numerous defamation cases. I've had handled defamation cases. Yes. And that's probably just what they enjoy. They think about money. They think about jobs for lawyers. I think about integrity. I think about principles. And what I'm saying today is, well, you write it on blogs. What I'm saying, Madam Speaker, is that there are cases, in instances where media will write as an article, pick something from Wikipedia, pick something from the blog sites, and publish in the mainstream media. And an innocent litigant will have to spend thousands of dollars to go to court and prove that he's right. I haven't done it. He has to go through High Court. He has to go through the whole process of the High Court procedure, 8 years, 9 years of cases, and what he gets, $5,000, $6,000 in compensation. Now, this Media Industry Development Decree 2010 is not helping, it's not curtailing the media, it's helping the citizens of Fiji. It's helping the people of this country from attacks of this kind that we have seen, and it's not only happening now, it's been happening. Media and democracy don't mean that you take a scattergun and start fighting at everybody. I think the opposition likes that approach. Just take the scattergun and shoot at everybody. But there must be some integrity. There must be some responsibility. Now, if you allow, media is an essential part of democracy, we understand. But if you allow them to be irresponsible, then there is no end to where these things will end. There will be stories, there will be comics, there will be cartoons about all of us in the media. And what will happen? We will be asked to go to courts. We'll be asked to go to lawyers, file a writ, and you can come to me and I'll file it for you too. Yeah, of course at a charge. Now, Madam, to add to what Dr. Reddy has said, this decree is making the media more responsible, and Mr. Ashwin Raj is sitting here, and he's also been a victim of one of those articles. And if this blanket, this protection is removed, then the media will not be responsible, and we will all be dragged down on the streets and made a mockery of. Therefore, with these words, Madam Speaker, I cannot and I will not support this motion to revoke the Media Industry Development Decree 2010. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Honorable Tepon Ronidalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I made a few notes. I'm going to refer to it through this contribution. Free speech, Madam Speaker, which includes free media, is the keystone of any democracy. And why do we say that, Madam Speaker? Obviously, democracy is about representation of people, and like this Parliament. And people get to choose their representatives. How are they to choose if information that helps them to choose, make that choice, is not freely available to them? If I were cheeky, I'd say they choose what we have, Madam Speaker. But this decree is very restrictive, as we've heard from the mover, the Honorable Dr. Biman Prasad. And I will refer to various sections of the decree and read them out for our benefit. But before I go there, Madam Speaker, the question has been asked by another speaker: what would happen if this decree were to be taken away? What would happen is the democracy that we've had up to when this decree came in. Madam Speaker, in big democracies like the United States of America, where they have a lot of secrets that they want to keep, they are not so insecure as to have decrees or laws like this. In fact, they take the mickey out of it. The President of the United States, Madam Speaker, not so long ago, went along to the White House Correspondents' Dinner and took along his anger translator to talk about how he really felt about the media. So while he was talking nicely on the surface, his anger translator was saying things completely different, making faces, getting angry, cursing the White House correspondents. And that was, I thought, a very good show of what media freedom is all about. Because in every democracy, politicians will always have run-ins with the media. And even the President of the United States, the most powerful man on this planet, wouldn't dream of a law or a structure to restrict speech. Here he instead takes along this comedian to take the mickey out of journalists that he can't stand and whatever they've been running as his anger translator. And there have been a lot of talk in my party about having my own anger translator to communicate certain things. But this is not a new thing, Madam Speaker, politicians having run-ins with the media. And as a runner, lowly runner for the lead of the Fijian Association Party back in late 1990s, 1999, I had real issues with some journalists in this country. I used to think, oh, what can we do with these journalists? They just don't print the truth, they don't do this. But never, ever, Madam Speaker, would I have condoned a law, a draconian one, to limit free speech, because that just stifles the information that goes to the people. And we've already heard from the other speakers, Madam Speaker, how that is injurious to the state as a whole. Perhaps the government ought to think more about having a sense of humor with the media so that it would help them. And I've also heard from other speakers about there not being no evidence of this limitation of speech. I can say confidently, Madam Speaker, that various publishers and journalists have to run their stories by their lawyers. Their lawyers have to approve stories before they print because they're scared of this decree. It's true, Madam Speaker. And during the campaign, I had to defend colleagues, former colleagues at the bar and say, if I were their lawyer, I would also tell them, don't run that story, because you run the risk of this decree. Don't run it, because the client's interest is the priority above sensationalizing or whatever other accusations that might come that journalists wish to indulge in. So, Madam Speaker, if I can, that is the evidence of lawyers rightly restricting the free speech of media, their clients, for their own protection. If I can refer to sections of the decree which the establishment of MIDA, Madam Speaker, the Minister for Communications, who is also the Attorney General, appoints the 5 persons who are there. And so this idea of the Honorable Minister for Education about almost, it sounded like social engineering, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to be let out to the community, is in the power of a politically partisan office. And this is not just Fiji First. We don't want any other Minister of Communications in the future to have this power. Whether it be Fiji First, or if one day this side of the House gets a Minister for Communications, Madam Speaker, that minister should never have this power. Should never have this power. And if I can refer, Madam Speaker, to the powers of MIDA, that's in Section 9 of this decree. The authority shall have power to do anything for the purpose of discharging its functions and duties under the decree or any other written law, or which is incidental or conducive to the discharge of those functions and duties, and in particular may, so it's not restrictive, that definition is very large. All the things that are listed there, Madam Speaker, includes monitoring compliance with ethical standards of print and broadcast media in accordance with the Media Code of Ethics and Practice, monitor advertising practices of the print and broadcast media, goes on, monitor compliance by television broadcasters with the Television Program Classifications Code, it goes on, Madam Speaker. And then, if it's not sufficient that the Minister for Communications, and again, let's not just think of this minister, any other future Minister for Communications, not enough that he or she would appoint this MIDA, they have Section 10, directions by minister. The minister may give such directions not inconsistent with the provisions of the decree as to the performance of the functions and duties and exercise of powers of MIDA. Just to make it absolutely clear, apart from me appointing you, I will also direct you as to how you exercise your powers. Now, Madam Speaker, the other section that I wish to refer to was Section 17 of the decree, protection from liability. No proceeding, civil or criminal, shall lie against the authority for anything it may do or fail to do in the course of the exercise or intended exercise of its functions, unless it is shown that it did not act in good faith or without reasonable care. No proceeding, civil or criminal, shall lie personally against any member, officer, or employee of MIDA. Now, Madam Speaker, this is interesting. We've always had from the other side of the House, they profess to have absolute confidence in our judiciary, and yet these provisions take judicial functions away from the judiciary as though we don't have confidence that they can interpret what is of national security and speech that should be allowed into the community. Through these restrictive and ouster clauses, we are taking away judicial functions and giving them to the executive arm. And again, Madam Speaker, it's not just this minister. We don't want any other minister in the future to have this power. And that is why that we say, Madam Speaker, that this decree should be taken away. And there is a Section 20 on political advertising, wide powers in Section 22. So political advertising, Madam Speaker, which will include not only the incumbent minister's party, but other parties competing with the incumbent minister, not just this minister, any minister in the future. Why should that minister have power over what his or her rivals get to put out as political advertisements? Section 22, Madam Speaker, content regulation. The content of any media service must not include material which is against public interest or order, is against national interest, or creates communal discord. Madam Speaker, before this decree came into force, speech was regulated by the courts, what speech that is not allowed in our discourse, and they would take all this into consideration. And all of these things, including the laws of defamation, Madam Speaker, were things that were developed over many decades and over a century or more by the common law. So the courts are properly equipped to deal with this, as the Honorable Dr. Biman Prasad has already set out. Why should a body, Madam Speaker, that is appointed by a politically partisan minister, this one or into the future, why should any minister in the future have this power over his content that would touch on his political opposition? It is draconian, Madam Speaker. It is just totally out of sync with what a modern democracy should be like. And I note, Madam Speaker, that the Minister for Education could barely raise his voice in defense of this decree. And I know it's because all of his wisdom and education would tell him not to.
Order. Order, please do not address a member directly.
And Madam Speaker,
I have not
and
finished.
the last issue.
I have not finished, please, order. Just address the Speaker.
Yes,
Thank
Madam
you.
Speaker. And on the last issue, there was a comment made by a learned colleague that defamation laws were not sufficient because people couldn't take, it was expensive to take people to court. What I'd say to that, Madam Speaker, is at least defendants were known because they were put into the mainstream media. You could say X and Y said so about me, I'm going to take X and Y to court. Now that that freedom has been taken away by this decree, Madam Speaker, people are unknown, as the Honorable Dr. Biman Prasad has said, and they go into these blog sites, and then we are looking around. I want to sue a few people on those blog sites, but I can't find their identity, Madam Speaker. And that is what is a result of this sort of decree. Now we can't take people for defamation. We don't know who the defendants are. Madam Speaker, and this is just part of an environment which we've spoken of many times, this restrictive environment that does not, is not conducive to people having confidence in this economy. There could be much more investment. If serious investors overseas saw, well, if I took 20 million, 100 million to Fiji, and if I had problems there with certain personnel, can I freely air my story in the media about what's happened in this conduct or the next? Lawyers will say, don't bother. There is a media decree there. You can only say what, so you make sure your investment is this way. You make sure that you just forget about it. And Madam Speaker, that is one of the consequences, apart from not knowing defendants and restricting our democracy, and that's my contribution this morning.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the interest of Honourable Bulitavu was signalling to me that he wants to eat, so I'll be very, very quick. Madam Speaker, there are numerous fundamental flaws in the arguments that have been put by the other side. But just to be very succinct, I'd like to refer all the members of this House to the Constitution. The Constitution, Madam Speaker, is the supreme law of the land. Section 7 of the Constitution states that all laws need to be consistent with the Constitution. And if any member has an aggrievement, they want to air some issue that they believe is unconstitutional, a law is, they can take it to the courts. Honourable Prasad has been speaking a lot about this. Why doesn't he, armed with his lawyers, take the matter to the courts? And when it's brought before the courts, Section 7 says, I refer, Madam Speaker, it says, in addition to complying with Section 3, when interpreting and applying this chapter, a court, tribunal or any authority must promote the values that underlie a democratic society based on human dignity, equality and freedom. And B, if relevant, consider international law applicable to the protection of the rights and freedoms in this chapter. So, Madam Speaker, that avenue is there. That avenue is there for them to challenge that law. Now, let me also tell you about freedoms, Madam Speaker. We have freedoms. No freedom has no limitation placed on it, except probably the freedom not to be tortured, as is set out in the Constitution. The Constitution has no limitations on being tortured. So, Madam Speaker, of course there are some countries that have allowed torture as a means of getting information. We talk about USA, Guantanamo Bay, they allow waterboarding. The Israeli Supreme Court has allowed a form of what we would call torture for the protection of the sovereign state. All freedoms have some limitation placed to it, all other freedoms. In the same way, freedom of speech, freedom of publication does not give the media to write any story about any individual. It does not give the media the right to say, for example, well, we know Mr. XYZ was standing outside Pender Street, therefore he was seeing prostitutes. They can't make those statements. The media also cannot go and say, well, we believe because there are too many Chinese coming to Fiji, let's kill all the Chinese. There are certain laws, there are restrictions on hate speech. So there are limitations to these freedoms, Madam Speaker. Now, the debate in this House so far, in particular from the other side, seems to be focused on politicians, seems to be focused on people in this House. The Media Development Authority decree is not about that. It's about the standards to be set. It's about the rights of the individuals. What the Honourable Prasad twisted around when he talked about the appeal to the Court of Appeal, he said, oh, why should the companies only appeal if it's more than $50,000, but individuals can go? Because the individual person needs protection. If an individual citizen of Fiji who does not have the means to go to the Court of Appeal, he or she should have the right to do that. Whereas the Fiji Times, the Fiji Sun or Fiji TV, they're media organizations. They're limited liabilities, FBC. They need to have a particular threshold before they meet. So it's a protection of the individual themselves. So, Madam Speaker, you see, this is being all put out of context. We, of course, had our advertisements knocked back by Fiji Times during the campaign time. They were advertisements that were run by Sodelpa. that we thought were factually and legally incorrect, but they printed it. When we wanted to do a response, their lawyers came back and said, no, you can't do this report, or you can't do this response, this is how you amend it. We decided not to print it. That's how it functioned. We don't go running off and saying that there is no freedom, etc. Now, the other point that the Honorable Prasad, the mover of the motion, forgot to mention is that if you look at the decree, Schedule 1, Media Code of Ethics and Practice, guess where that is from? That's verbatim, borrowed from the Media Council that existed before this, the Self-Regulating Council, borrowed verbatim from that. And they don't talk about unfettered access, they talk about accuracy, balance, and fairness. These are the standards that they talk about. So, Madam Speaker, the reality is this. You have many other countries in the world. I mean, they don't talk about Samoa, but I've got the Samoan Broadcasting Act. I've got their tribunals. They are, I tell you, draconian. I have also got here with me the Singaporean Act, Development Authority. They need to read that. Now, Madam Speaker, the point also is, this year, on the World Press Freedom Index 2015, Fiji has jumped in its rankings from 107 to 93rd. So we are improving, and we will continue to need to improve. No doubt about that. It's not going to be done simply by a sweep of some law, therefore it's all be hunky-dory. No. They need to look at the essence of what this decree is about. All the members of Parliament who walk out of this door every day, the media, Madam Speaker, I'm not pointing at you, pointing at the door. All the members of Parliament who walk out of this door, is there anybody restricting them from their voices being heard? Is anybody telling them, no, you can't only speak to that person or that person? It's up to the media organizations, what story they run, who they want to run it, what's the editorial spin on it. That's up to the media organization. And let me also remind you, Madam Speaker, no journalist, no media organization, no editor, no publisher has been charged under this decree since its inception. There has nobody. There was one, Madam Speaker, there was one in respect of the ownership issues. In respect of the ownership issues. Nothing to do with any publication of any story. So this, Madam Speaker, is the reality. Madam Speaker, the other point that I wanted to point out, and very, very simply, that Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, you know, the kind of sort of noise in the background, I was sort of a bit distracted by that. Madam Speaker, the point is, there is no restriction in terms of what gets printed. There are normal laws to be followed. There are media standards that need to be adhered to. Is if anybody has an agreement, they can take it to the tribunal, or they can take it to the MIDA, then they can take it to the tribunal. There's a right of appeal to that, simply. And if they feel there's opposition so aggrieved by it, please take it to the court system. Let it be tested. Please do that rather than bringing silly motions to this House, Madam Speaker. We should reject this motion.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Honourable Minister for Trade and Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be very short today, but I'm going to bring up a story from 45 years ago that was told in this very House, Madam Speaker, and I think the statement actually reflects exactly what this side of the House is talking about, including them. Madam Speaker, I read from the Hansard reports of the 21st of December 1970. This was part of the appropriation bill. There were some discussions going on then regarding media, etc., and the responsibilities and irresponsibilities. This statement was made by the then Honourable Leader of Opposition, the late S.M. Koya. Madam Speaker, I hope that the three members of the National Federation Party sitting on the other side listen very carefully. Madam Speaker, this is the statement. Shame on you, sir.
Absolutely.
Shame on you for being disrespectful, sir.
Please, I would like to warn the members, please be respectful, uphold the decorum in the House. Thank you.
You're not my father.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I quote, "It will not be a big joke when the country goes mad. The country goes berserk because the newspapers of the day in the critical hour have indulged in sensationalism. I know, sir, our limitations, and I'm well aware of what is happening. Whilst we cannot advocate the abrogation of freedom of speech, we can, nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, pass sufficient laws to see that they are within the disciplined society." Disciplined society, my friends. I have said before, and I will say it again, sir, freedom and democracy without discipline are meaningless. They mean nothing. They are only free in a well-ordered society. I only wish, Madam Speaker, that they had read this or taken the time to read it.
Give them a copy.
I shall. I will make a copy available to you. Madam Speaker, what it really means is we are, and I want to correct some wrongs too, about what has been said economically. We are doing quite well, Madam Speaker, as a nation. We're doing well economically, Madam Speaker. There is no block to investment just because of the media industry decree. There isn't, absolutely none. I have in this House made available figures that show everybody, all and sundry, and the entire population as to how well we are doing. There is no obstacle, Madam Speaker. So it would be wrong to say that this particular decree is a block to any investment in this country. In fact, we have created such an environment that Madam Speaker, that we are getting inundated with investment applications at Investment Fiji. But in any event, Madam Speaker, a fine balance must be had. And I was hoping that the three members on the other side of the House that belong to the National Federation Party would have read this and not bought this motion, because that is where it was born. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the Honourable Dr. Biman Prasad to speak in reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank all the honourable members for their contribution on this motion. First of all, Madam Speaker, some of the contributions and some of the references to the motion was actually incorrect. If they read the motion carefully, it says that this Parliament supports a review or a repeal. So reference to just a repeal by some of the honourable members on the other side was not correct. The other point, Madam Speaker, is I think the contribution of some of the members from the other side was a bit confusing. I think they were confused about a responsible media with the regulations and how draconian they are. None of them, Madam Speaker, talked about the draconian penalties, the fines, the jail term, and the reason for self-censorship in the media. You talk to any journalist in this country today, Madam Speaker, and they'll tell you how they are restricted by the media decree and the draconian fines. Madam Speaker, when we talk about repealing or reviewing this decree, we're not talking about irresponsible media. We're not saying that. We want responsible media. We want sufficient laws to ensure that there is a responsible media. And I must say, the code that the honourable member from the other side, and let me say the National Federation Party has the greatest respect of its former leader of the opposition, late Honourable Siddiq Koya. And what he said, Madam Speaker, was coming from a man with wisdom. He would have never supported, Madam Speaker, this draconian decree. He would have never supported. Never, Madam Speaker. Never supported this draconian decree and would have said we want freedom of speech in this country. The other point I want to make, Madam Speaker, and let me say this. The Honorable Leonard Attorney General always tells me that I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell him that I'm a father of a bright young lawyer. But Section 173 of the Constitution, and I've said this before, Madam Speaker, when I was making my contribution to the motion by the Honorable Prime Minister on IPU, that all the decrees from December 2006 until the first sitting of the Parliament last year, Madam Speaker, according to this Constitution, is intact. And 4C of the provision, Madam Speaker, it says any promulgation, decree or declaration or any subordinate laws made under any such promulgation, decree or declaration, including any provision of any such laws made as may be made between 5th December 2006 until the first sitting of the first Parliament under this Constitution, for being inconsistent with any provision of this Constitution, including provision of Chapter 2 of this Constitution, Madam Speaker. Chapter 2 of the Constitution is the Bill of Rights. So this is what we are saying. This is what we are saying, Madam Speaker, that the only hope for this Constitution is that we need to review or repeal some of the decrees that are included in this. And I agree with the Attorney General that we need to challenge some of these in the court, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, let me just conclude. I'm actually surprised. The confusion. You're always shocked by what I say. And let me, Madam Speaker, just before I make the final point, I wanted to show the honourable member a copy of the page of the title of one of the books that I edited with one of my colleagues, which says Media and Development in the Pacific. And I would suggest that some of the members on the other side who contributed on the motion actually read that. But one final point, Madam Speaker. Responsibility and freedom of speech are interlinked. But you don't need to suppress freedom to have responsibility. That is the point of this motion, Madam Speaker, that there are provisions in the decree, and this is why I have ordered the motion, Madam Speaker, to say that the House supports a review or a repeal. If we can't repeal the whole decree, and there are elements in the decree, Madam Speaker, this is why we have carefully ordered this motion, that there are provisions in the decree that may be needed. It's not an amending the motion, it's the motion. Read the motion, Honourable Member, read the motion carefully. Says review or a repeal. So, Madam Speaker, we are saying that there is a need to look at this decree, remove the draconian provisions so that people in this country, the media organizations in this country, the journalists in this country can feel that they have their space and, without being irresponsible, without fear, cover the issues that they want to do so. Madam Speaker, I hope that the honourable members on the other side, as I said, I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. This is not about politics. This is not about theatrics. This is not about any kind of drama. This is really an appeal to you, and appeal to the Prime Minister. He should tell his Attorney General He should tell his Attorney General that there are provisions in this decree that should go. Because the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, himself quite rightly talks about genuine democracy, and I support him. But he should know that this decree will embarrass him. This decree will embarrass him.
Please,
somewhere.
Honourable member.
So,
please,
again, Madam Speaker, I appeal to the Prime Minister, I appeal to the government side.
Order. Please refrain from speaking directly to a person or a member. You can speak to me.
You, Madam Speaker, I appeal to the Prime Minister to think about this carefully. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I wish to end my contribution on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, the Honourable Dr. Vimal Prasad, for his reply. The Parliament will now vote. Does any member oppose Honourable Dr. Vimal Prasad's motion? No. Someone does oppose, so that we will go into electronic voting on this particular motion. And we now put the motion to the vote. Open the vote. You're now voting for or against the motion. Thank you. Close the vote. Order. Order. Thank you. We close the vote.
Result of the vote as follows: 17 ayes, 24 noes, and 9 have not voted.
There being 17 ayes and 24 noes, the motion is defeated.